Quadratic inequalities. So in this video, we'll see how to solve a quadratic inequality. Let's take a look at using some examples here. So a quadratic inequality, let's say we have the following problem. Now, in order to solve an inequality, we need to know how to solve the equation first. So, to solve a quadratic inequality, we need to solve the corresponding quadratic equation. So change it to an equal sign first and figure out where it's equal to 0. So this problem right here, I can solve it by factoring minus 7 and y minus 10 is what it factors to. Y times y will give you the y squared. Negative 7 times negative 10 equals 70. And of course, if I were to add the negative 10 and negative 7, it should give me the middle term, which is negative 17. So in this case, either the first factor has to be equal to 0 or that second factor has to be equal to 0. So what makes this 0 is if y was equal to 7, and this if y equals 10. So the solution to a quadratic equation is y equals 7 and y equals 10. Now, to solve a quadratic equation, we need to know the following condition here. If a is bigger than 0, the parabola opens up. It faces up. If a was less than 0, opens down. So your a value tells you whether it opens up or down. If this was a negative value, it would face down. If it's positive, it looks up. So we know it's equal to 0 at those two values. And my a is positive, meaning the parabola is going to face up. And those two numbers right here tell me that the parabola crosses the x-axis at y equals 7. X equals 7 and x equals 10. Since it faces up, I'll do a random sketch. Now, my inequality symbol says less than 0. Well, our y value are less than 0 as we go down. So this happens whenever the function is below the x-axis. Now, between what two value is the function below the x-axis? That is, the graph is below the x-axis between the values of y less than 10 and greater than or 7. Between the values 7 and 10, that's where the function is less than 0, and I'm using the variable y because of the original problem has a variable y. So this is how you write the answer, or of course you can write it in interval notation as 7 comma and comma around the two numbers 7 comma 10. Let's take a look at another example. Example 2, let's say I have x squared plus 9x plus 13 is greater than or equal to, is greater than negative 7. Now for this problem, I need to make one side 0 first, so that means add the 7 to both sides to get x squared plus 9x plus 20 greater than 0. I want one side to be at least a 0. Now, convert this to the corresponding equation and solve for that equation first. So I believe this can be factored as well. X and an x, two numbers that multiply to 20 but then add up to 9 are positive 4 and positive 5. If the multiples of those two equal 0, either the first factor equals 0 or that second factor is equal to 0. So that means x equals -4 or x equals -5. Those two makes it equal to 0. Those are the solution to the equation. Now let's look at a value. My a, since I have a positive x squared here, that tells me my a is greater than 0, meaning it's going to face up. The parabola is going to open up. And let's do a random sketch. -4 and -5. -5 would be right here, and let's say -4 is right over here. My parabola is going to look like this, and it should pass through those 2 points. So a random sketch would be that right here. Now the answer to our question is, I want to know when this is bigger than 0. Well, our y value, bigger than 0 means positive. You have a y value positive are over here, whenever the graph is above the x-axis. So the graph is above the y-axis for all the x values that are less than -5. So that means x has to be less than -5, or for all the x values that are bigger than -4. In interval notation, you would write this as -infinity, the smallest possible we can go. We use -infinity as smallest, union from -4 all the way to positive infinity. Let's look at example 3. Example 3, I'll look at the following. X parentheses x plus 1 greater than 112 minus 5x. Make one side a 0, so I'll distribute this first, x squared plus x, and then I'll add the 5 over here, so plus 5x, and subtract 112 to the other side. You get a minus 112 is greater than 0. Combine the like terms, x squared plus 6x minus 112 is greater than 0. So that is, as we'll look at this problem here in order to solve that. Now, and of course, if it's not easy to factor, you can always use the quadratic formula to solve this. But I know this factors into the following here. We'll set it equal to 0 and then factor it. This should factor to x plus 14 and x minus 8. If I multiply those two, I get a negative 112. Add those two, you get a positive 16. So that means x equals negative 14 or x equals 8 is the solution to the equation, to the equal sign. Now my a again is positive. I know it opens up. So if I were to graph this, just a random sketch, it doesn't have to be exactly. Negative 14, let's say, is here. Positive 8 is here. And I know the graph has to pass through the 2 points. So it comes down and then goes back up. Now, bigger than 0 means whenever you're above the x-axis. Over here and to the side over here. So that means x is less than negative 14 or x is bigger than 8 as your solution to the inequality. Let's look at problem 4. a squared plus 3a plus 2 is less than -3 parentheses a plus 2. So distribute -3a minus 6 is less than a squared plus 3a plus 2. Make one side a 0, so I'll make this 0. That is, shift them all over to this other side. Plus 3a plus 6 plus 3a plus 6. Add straight down. A squared plus 6a plus 8 is less than 0. So that is the inequality. Now we're gonna solve for the corresponding equation. And I believe this can be factored into 4 and 2. So that is a plus 2, a plus 4. You multiply those two numbers, you get 8, you add them, you get a 6, meaning a equals -2 or a equals -4. Those are solution to the equation here. What is the solution to the inequality? Well, we look at our a. Well, a is positive, meaning it's going to have this shape right here, parabola opening upwards. And let's graph it. The graphing part is just a random sketch. Make sure the values are plugged in correctly. So -2 and -4 would be, let's say, right here. So draw a parabola that passes through the 2 points facing up. Now the symbol here says less than, meaning less than 0 means negative values. So your y values have negative values. So that's whenever the graph is below the x-axis, and it's below the x-axis for those x value right here. So that means a is less than -2 for all the x values that are less than 2 and bigger than -4. In interval notation, it would be -4, comma -2 with parentheses around the two numbers. Let's do one more. Let's look at, this is problem 5. 2x squared less than or equal to 5x minus 2. Now make one side 0, so 2x squared minus 5x plus 2 is less than or equal to 0. So I move the 5x to the opposite side as well as the -2. Now solve for the corresponding equation. That is the corresponding equation. Now let's try to factor this. And one of the two front numbers should have a 2x. The other one should be an x. Numbers that multiply to 1 and 2 are 1 and 2 plus and minus. So it could be a, let's make it a -1 here and a -2 here, because 2x and -2x make a -4x, and then plus that extra -1x here makes -5x, which is what I want. So 2x minus 1 is equal to 0, or x minus 1 equals 0. What makes the 0 is x equals 2. And then over here, we will add 1 first and divide by 2 to get the result of x equals 1/2. Now, remember, those two only makes it equal to 0. But we're interested in less than or equal to 0. So, What you do is you look at your a value. My a value is positive, so that means your shape faces up and it's gonna pass through the 2 points here. One half would be up here somewhere, and a 2 would be up here, and of course the parabola opens up. This is a random sketch. Now we're interested in less than or equal to. So it's equal to at those two numbers, but it's less than for all the x values that are between those two numbers. So that means my solution would be x is less than 2, greater than or equal to 1/2. Now if you notice the symbol, the inequality symbol here, they do have the equal sign underneath. So that means bracket 1/2 to 2. In interval notation would be written 1/2 to 2 with brackets, meaning 1/2 and 2 are part of the solutions. And I'll do one more. Let's try problem number we'll just try this here. Problem 6. X squared plus 4 is greater than or equal to 2x squared minus 3x. Now I'll move the 2x squared over here by subtracting 2x squared. So that would give you a negative 2x squared, a negative 2x squared, a plus 3x, and a plus 3x. So this is 0, this is greater than or equal to. X squared plus negative 2x squared gives you a negative x squared. This is x. And then follows the 3x and then the plus 4. Now, I can either solve this for x, you can factor this, and of course we're gonna solve for the corresponding equation. Let's see if I can factor this. Negative x and a negative x gives me a positive x squared. I need two numbers that multiply together give me 4. And negative 3, negative 4. One of them has to be a 4, one has to be a 3. Yeah, I'll cut the video there.